Okay, welcome back to the roof here at Griffith Observatory, where we're having a wonderful evening. So many wonderful guests stopping by to join us and telling us more interesting things about Mars. To the dome over here next to me and the great telescope, we're looking at Mars through the historic Zeiss telescope that's been here since the observatory opened in 1935. And we can see a view of that in the lower right-hand corner. It's kind of wobbly there because of all Earth's atmosphere getting in the way. And but you know, looking through a telescope isn't the only way. And there is a large party group right over the balcony here. Can you hear them on the? Kind of. So if you hear a lot of loud giggling, that's evidence that there's a very nice evening going on here. There you go, at Griffith Observatory. But as I was saying, it's we aren't limited to just looking through a telescope. We have sent many spacecraft there, and there is a spacecraft sent by NASA on its way to Mars as we speak. So I have with me, next to me, a systems engineer on the InSight mission from Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Farah Alibay.
Hi.
Hi, Farah. So nice to have you here joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And then also Patrick So, some of you will recognize also from All Space Considered, who has been covering the InSight mission for our show. So
hello.
We're here with Farah. And Farah, tell us a little bit about how you became a systems engineer on the spacecraft and started working at Jet Propulsion Lab.
Yeah, I feel like maybe like every kid, I wanted to be an astronaut when I was growing up. I know that you had Buzz Aldrin here earlier, but what changed my life was Apollo 13 and seeing that movie. So, so I have a lot of friends in the industry here, and I always tell them, you know, Hollywood did play a part in my life because that's how I discovered space. Eventually discovered that, you know, being an astronaut wasn't exactly a viable job. A lot of people apply and not many people get it. So my backup was, well, I actually realized that what I enjoyed about space was the teamwork that happens between the teams, and you know, we all work on things that are essentially impossible. No one's ever done them before, and it's challenging, and that's what I really enjoy. And so I ended up pursuing a degree in aerospace engineering, did my PhD at MIT, and during that time I interned at JPL. JPL actually takes on, our population every summer grows by 10%. So we currently have 600 interns ranging from high school all the way to graduate students that come to JPL, discover what we call our universe. That's how I got my foot in the door, and that's how a lot of younger engineers actually have gotten their foot in the door. And when I joined JPL about 5 years ago is when I started getting involved with the InSight mission and its partner mission, MARCO.
Wonderful. And what does that mean, systems engineer?
So what I tell people is that I'm a jack of all trades and master of none, because really my job is to make sure that everyone on the team gets along. So it's 75% technical and 25% leadership and people skill. Essentially what happens when you build a spacecraft is you're limited in terms of the amount of resources you have, right? You have a rocket that has a maximum amount of weight that you can launch to Mars, for example, and then you have different subsystems that are competing against each other for resources. So the power person maybe wants the biggest arrays they can have, the thermal person wants to stay as warm as they can, the instruments absolutely want all the data, and then, you know, the telecom person tells you, well, I can't really get you that much data all the way from Mars if you're only giving me this tiny antenna. So you somehow have to, you know,
they all go into Thunderdome and work it out. Huh?
That's what it is, right? So I have to talk to each of them and figure out, well, what is it that you actually need, because we only have this much money and I can't give it all to you because otherwise we won't be doing any interesting science.
Oh.
So it always comes down to trading some of these resources so that we can get as much science done as possible with the amount of money that we have, essentially.
And so as the engineer, you just try to work on different scenarios and how those trades all play out?
Exactly. So usually an early mission concept, that's what systems engineers do. They sort of figure out, okay, what is it that the mission has to do and what are the trades? On InSight, I was actually a payload systems engineer. So my job was to make sure that when the instruments were delivered, so actually we have, and we'll talk a little bit about the mission, but we have some foreign contributions. And my job was actually to make sure that once the instruments were delivered, they were integrated and tested properly. So we actually put the lander and the instruments through all the rigors of what it will see. That we call it a shake and bake. So we shake it, and that's the same shaking as they'll feel as we land on Mars, and that's actually the worst shaking environment. And then the bake is essentially where we take it to hot and cold to mimic the heat and coldness of space that we're seeing. So that's one of the types of tests that we do, where we put the instruments through those environments, so by the time they get on Mars, whatever happens to them, they've seen worse, and we know they're going to work.
So it's worse to go land on Mars than it is to launch, huh?
Yeah, as it turns out.
That's very surprising.
I was pretty surprised about that, because I didn't know that was a driving scenario. Yeah, because you think like, oh, right, like a rocket is just essentially a barely controlled bomb, right? And you're on this thing, and it shakes a lot, but apparently landing is a lot worse because of just hitting the atmosphere and shaking around as you do that.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
Well, you brought with you some slides, and if we can go to those slides, we've got a little intro here. There you are, Farah Alame, InSight Payload Systems Engineer. Do you say that to people at parties and they say, what do you do? You say, I'm a payload systems engineer, and then what do they do?
I just say I'm a rocket scientist.
Oh,
it's much better.
Answer. That is much better. So you're on this mission InSight. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what is InSight supposed to do for us?
Yeah, so maybe if we go to the next slide, I have a pretty picture, I guess. So one of the interesting things, right, and we're here in California, so you know about earthquakes, right? But one of the things that I maybe didn't realize before I even joined this mission is that the way that we know about the interior of the Earth and what it's made of, or what it's composed of, is because of earthquakes. Because of the waves that are triggered whenever we have an earthquake, the way they reflect and refract is what tells you about the interior of the Earth. So we know, for example, fun party fact that I've never used at a party, but my PI has told me this, is the crust of the Earth is actually, the ratio of the crust with the rest of the Earth is about this thickness, the same thickness as a tomato skin. So that's about as thick as it is on a normal big tomato. That's the ratio.
You definitely have to use that at a party.
Yeah, I don't know who that works with, though. Unknown. But then we also know, right, that there's a liquid core and a solid core, and the liquid core is the reason why we have a magnetosphere, right? That's why we have a magnetic field, because this liquid metal core is moving, creating a magnetic field. The magnetic field is actually the reason why there's life on Earth, right? Because, the sun is constantly bombarding us with energetic particles, and that magnetic field is catching those particles and protecting us, and also protecting the atmosphere from being blown away from that solar wind. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have the moon, right? And the moon, actually, we flew a seismometer to the moon. As it turns out, the moon is boring. It's so dead. There is nothing going on. It is just a solid piece of rock with some differentiation, but nothing moving.
And is that what we're seeing here in this slide?
Yeah, that's on the far right on the slide. So Mars is somewhere in between. Mars is a rocky planet, so it formed probably like Earth, right? But it evolved differently. For example, we know that Mars used to have a magnetic field, but it went away at some point. There's evidence on Mars there's actually remnant magnetic fields, but it no longer has a global magnetic field. So does that mean that maybe it had a liquid core and it's gone? We know it used to have an atmosphere and it's no longer there. So Mars somehow formed the same way as Earth, but evolved differently. And that's what we're trying to figure out. And so, we often joke on InSight that, we could have done this science on really any rocky planet, right? Venus is also very different. We're just interested in the evolution of rocky planets. So why are we going to Mars? Well, the reason why is because it's actually the easiest planet to go to. It's still really hard, but somehow we decided that was the easiest place to go to do these investigations.
So between these three objects, Earth, if they were like bells, the seismic waves for the Earth would be a dull thud. For the moon, it would ring like a bell because it's solid all the way through.
Yeah.
And then Mars we're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah, we actually don't know at all what it is.
So we'll find out when InSight lands. If Mars thuds, then we'll know there's a
liquid center, maybe.
Yeah.
And if it rings like a bell, that's a lovely thought.
That's like the moon.
We've had we have at Griffith Observatory a seismograph.
Oh.
And there's one that kids can go jump by, and I know you guys have something
Yeah,
similar
we
for
have one
Insight,
that we bring
and
around.
watch the little needle go back and forth. But we have a real one that measures earthquakes, and after some of the really big ones, you'll see the ringing.
Yeah.
It just continues in these, very regular waves. It's kind of a
amazing.
stunning thing to see that the whole Earth is ringing
yeah.
in the aftermath of an earthquake.
Yes, that's what we're hoping to see on Mars. But
That's
Mars is
amazing.
different from Earth, right? There's no tectonic plates.
Yeah.
And yet it has the biggest volcano in the solar system. I mean, it doesn't flow anymore, but
Yeah.
and it has a canyon that's 3 times deeper than the Grand Canyon.
What's
so,
up with that planet?
Yeah, we don't know. That's what we're trying to find out.
So those are the science goals of the mission.
Yeah, essentially. So we're doing that. We're studying the interior of Mars, and we're using really 3 experiments, and we have 3 instruments. We're doing it through seismology, so we have a seismometer, and that's what we've talked about. And then there's 2 other things. We're doing tracking using the antennas on the lander. We can actually track the position of the lander to within 10 meters. So.
Wow.
Yeah, and since we know where we landed and we know where Mars was, any change in the position that we're seeing is actually just the planet flexing and wobbling or nutating, right?
Oh, that's
it's
so
like
weird.
wobbling around its axis. It's
Yeah.
like if you've ever been at home and taken, I don't know if you've ever done this, if you haven't, go home and do it, I guess. Take a boiled egg and a raw egg and spin them. And you'll tell that they spin differently because of the content on the inside, right? I feel like I did that as a kid.
Yeah.
Much to my mom.
Oh, that's how you can find out in the fridge if they've got hard-boiled eggs or
center
not.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Or solid
No,
center.
yeah, because if you don't mark them, then so you can do this. It's a very useful trick.
Yeah.
You just spin it, and then you stop it for a second and take your hand away. And if it continues to spin, there's liquid on the inside because the
Because it's
liquid is
still
still
moving,
going.
yeah.
But if you stop it and then take your hand away and it just sits there, it's solid all the way through.
Yeah, the spinning pattern is also different for the 2.
All the things you learn by watching this webcast.
So that's exactly what we were doing on Mars, is seeing how Mars is spinning, and that gives us an idea of whether it's liquid or solid on the inside. And then we also have a heat flow probe that's actually going to go down the surface of Mars 5 meters, that's about 16 feet, and it actually has a thermal sensor on the end, so basically something that measures temperature. So as we go down, it's going to study that heat signature. And then when you get down below 10 feet, what happens is that you're no longer seeing any change in temperature that you're seeing. You're now isolated once you get below 10 feet from any change day or night or summer or winter that might be happening on the surface. You're far down enough that any temperature change that you're seeing is actually from the core or any heat emitting elements below the surface.
And do you expect the temperature to go up when you're...
Well, we don't really know. There's 2 things, there's 2 experiments we're doing. We're actually looking at, there's also a little heater at the end of the probe. And so we're actually going to send pulses of heat as we go down. And that gives us an idea because we have a tether that we drag along with it. Actually, if we go to the next slide, you'll see the heat flow probe. So there's a probe with a tether. You can see that HP3 instrument.
I
on
see
the
over
right-hand side.
here. Let me get the little arrow.
Yeah.
This.
So
That's the tether.
Yeah, that tether has little temperature sensors on it, so it can measure temperature. So when we send these heat pulses, the way that the heat diffuses up can give you an idea of what the soil is made of. And then below the surface, we're actually just interested in seeing what happens if there is a difference. So there's a long-term monitoring that we want to see. Is the core still cooling? Is it still emitting heat? Is there other properties that are, other elements below that are emitting heat? We don't know. That's part of the magic of
That
science
is
missions,
really exciting.
right?
When will we start to get an answer?
So we launched on the 5th of May out of Vandenberg. That was the first interplanetary launch out of Vandenberg, which was pretty cool.
I remember. Yes, that was.
We're currently about 15 million miles away from Earth and 21 million miles away from Mars. So we hit the halfway point sometime next month, and we'll land on Mars at midday Pacific time on Cyber Monday, so the Monday after Thanksgiving. So while you're doing your shopping.
So
maybe
what time did you say it would be?
it'll be around noon on
Noon Pacific time.
Yes, noon Pacific time.
Okay,
About
so if
2
you
p.m.
well,
Eastern time.
everybody's going to be at their computer doing their shopping.
Yeah.
So
or
you'll be at your
watch it in the
computer,
corner,
just
yeah.
go turn on the JPL feed.
Yeah, it'll be on NASA
That's a
TV for sure,
no-brainer.
and you'll be able to see what happens. So
So tell us about this entry and well, let's go back to the mission overview. As you said,
Yeah.
we can go to the slide. It's on its way there. And then, so you've got approach and then something called EDL
Yeah.
and surface op. So we're in cruise
we
right
really
now.
like acronyms at JPL. Or at NASA, JPL being an acronym of itself. So we're in cruise right now. You know, the approach phase is when we start getting closer to Mars. About a month away is when it starts getting busy for us. That's when we start really correcting the trajectory and getting ready for entry. And then the scariest part of landing on Mars is of going to Mars is the actual landing, is that's what we call entry, descent, and landing. So if we go to the next slide, there's actually a little animation, and we can start it. There you go. So as we approach Mars, what will happen is we first get rid of the cruise stage. That's the solar arrays that we were carrying during cruise to power the spacecraft. Then we enter the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is actually fairly thin, but it's thick enough that it's actually kind of annoying and you have to account for it. And at this point, the heat shield is what's burning up. It's actually made out of cork, is something that I found out.
Wow.
About 5 miles from the surface, we deploy a parachute, a supersonic parachute, and that's going to slow us down to about 1 mile above the surface. So then we get rid of the back shell, and that's actually InSight's legs that actually pop out from the bottom. And then about a mile from the surface, we then fire little retro rockets on the lander. So it has its own little rockets and slows itself down. So unlike other spacecraft like Curiosity that had the sky crane, this has its own little thrusters, and it just touches down on the surface all by itself.
So how long does it take from orbit to landing? Is it like 6 minutes of terror?
Yeah, it's around the 7-minute mark from hitting the atmosphere to landing on the surface, and it's all automated. You know, the light time delay is about 7 or 8 minutes as it is. So by the time we get there, so we plan everything ahead of time, and then we sit back and watch as the data comes down.
And are you engaged in, will you be in that room that everyone watches when...
So I will be watching. I won't be working that day because my job is actually to work on the instruments. So I actually work on the deployment phase when we get these instruments from the deck down to the surface. And actually, if you skip a couple of slides, maybe, I think...
Okay, let's see here.
I think there's actually, there's a video right here.
This one?
Yeah, of what happens once we get on the surface. So when we get on the surface, the instruments are actually on the deck of the lander. So what we do is we have a robotic arm and we take the instruments from the deck and we'll place them on the surface. That seems easy, but if you've ever played that claw game at the arcade, that's basically that, but all the way on Mars with light time delay. So,
7 minutes of delay.
Yeah, so we can't do it in real time. We somehow have to send, we have these little robotic arm with a little claw that grabs a super sensitive seismometer and pulls it off and gets it from the deck to the surface. So I often joke with my friends who, have friends who are on the navigation team and worry about EDL, and I'm like, I'm not worried about landing on Mars. We've done that before. But grabbing an instrument in that last meter, putting it on the surface, and then we have to put a cover on it. And that's a wind and thermal shield so that the seismometer that's really sensitive can actually detect seismic activity rather than wind activity and things like that.
There are some context cameras on the lander. Will we see pictures right after landing, or how soon will we see them?
So there's a camera on the deck, and then there's a camera on the arm. So one of the first pictures we'll actually take is a picture from the deck. I'm not quite sure exactly when it will be released. It just depends on how fast we can get it down from the orbiters, but likely within the first week or so we'll start seeing those pictures. And then one of the coolest pictures we'll take is when we release the arm. We'll actually take that camera and turn the arm around and take a selfie, because most of the people on the mission are millennials, but also because we want to make sure that actually the instruments, at least that's what we tell our lead engineer, right? We want to make sure that all the instruments are on the deck. So that'll be a pretty neat picture that'll come out too.
That's nice.
And in fact, there are pictures that are coming through EDL, are there not?
Not during EDL. There won't be any pictures during that time, but we will get data before and after. So you might be able to get, the orbiters will be pointed towards that site, so we might be able to get a high-level view of what the ground looks like after landing.
Oh, okay.
But again, those are all opportunistic, so we'll have to see how the lineup works out. EDL is actually one of the scariest times, so we try to do as little as possible other than the bare essential. But one of the missions I did mention is called Marco.
Yeah.
And Marco's job is actually to help us out a little bit during EDL.
That's right. So, yeah, if we can go to the slide.
Yeah, so Marco is a pair of shoebox-sized spacecraft. It's actually the first mission I worked on at JPL. The idea for this mission, which is basically two engineers and a paper napkin idea, came around when I first started at JPL. So literally that week, these engineers were thinking like, oh, how can we get the UHF signal, this radio signal that's coming out of InSight down to the Earth a little bit faster? And to give you an idea of why this issue is happening is as InSight lands on the surface, right, it's going to be sending data through its antenna that talks to the Martian orbiters. And it'll actually be talking to an orbiter called the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, MRO. The issue is MRO will be digesting all that data, but it can't send it back in real time. And as it passes over InSight, it actually sets behind Mars with respect to Earth. So as we view Mars, like if you were seeing it from here, for example, you'd have a direct line of sight with of MRO, but right after landing, it would pass over the pole and over the other side. So then there's no way to talk back until it rises again at the bottom, right? So that's about 4 or 5 hours. It's not a big deal, but when your baby is landing on Mars, the last thing you want to do is wait 5 hours to hear, to wait and hear what happened.
Yeah.
And so that's why we designed these CubeSats that are making their own way to Mars. They have their own little propulsion system, and they're just going to sneak in and listen for that signal as InSight is landing and transmit it back in near real time. Obviously, there's still light time delay. We can't go faster than light, but we will get the signal, about 7 or 8 minutes after InSight has actually landed, and of everything that's happening.
That's all.
Yeah.
5 hours.
Yeah.
Now there are two of them.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for two?
Yeah, this is the first time we were doing this, and so we figured that if we flew two, we would have a better chance of at least one making it. Both of them are still fine. As it turns out, we did an okay job. They are single string is what we call it, meaning that if something goes wrong with any of the switches or anything, then we would lose the whole spacecraft. So normally we would build things what we call dual string, where there's always a backup. So in this case, the backup is the other spacecraft. If both make it, we might change the orbits a little bit so we get different levels of coverage at different times.
Well, for our last image here, if we can go to the computer, I want to show this picture, which was taken, I believe.
Taken just a few days after launch. And
what are we looking here? Yeah.
What is it?
Okay, well, a little annotation.
That's Earth and the Moon right there. So Marco has two cameras, one on its deck and one below. And we use this camera to look back, actually to make sure that the antennas have been deployed properly, but also to look back. And the inspiration was the pale blue dot. So we were able to capture Earth and the Moon on our way out.
It was an exciting time to see this picture.
Yeah, well, that was also the first picture we got out of it, but it's pretty incredible how pointed it is, and it's
beautiful.
And it's funny because I remember testing that camera in the lab, and I used my face as a target. I even have a picture of my face in that camera.
The Earth, it takes pictures of whatever it's in front of it. But it's actually, if we can actually go back to that for just a second, I just want to make the comment, and though this may seem obvious, I think I'm just compelled to say that the Moon is round, Mars is round, and Earth is also round. It's not flat. We have pictures from spacecraft out there, and people like Buzz have been to the Moon and seen it, seen Earth, and so I just thought I would take this opportunity to have a little public service announcement.
It's also incredible how small it is when you look back. It's not that far.
Right.
its own,
Right, I know.
So now what will happen after EDL? Do these spacecraft sail back past Mars?
Yeah, so we don't have actually enough propellant to get into orbit because our sole mission was to do the entry, release, and landing telecommunication bay. So they're essentially what we call in the heliocentric orbit. So they're in orbit around the sun, and they're going to stay that way forever. So really, after if they make it to Mars, after that we'll be studying how the systems behave. These are off-the-shelf components. It was built in 18 months. It's a really fast build, and so what we want to understand is how do these systems compare to the really expensive spacecraft that we build? And because the real goal is this is a technology demonstration mission. So the idea is in the future, if we go to a planet where maybe we're not so lucky and there's no Aurora or Odyssey in orbit, we can use things like Mako to do telecommunication relay and help us out.
So you actually do a orbital insertion and maybe
Possibly, or we could do flybys. So the idea is we really want to see how the systems behave to from there evaluate what we can do in the future.
Well, it is so lovely to meet you, Farah, and what an exciting time for you. What an exciting career you're building. That's really very cool.
Exciting, yeah.
And we're so happy that you were able to join us tonight on this beautiful night. Look up there and know that your little spacecraft, your baby, is swinging, well, not with wings, but floating, cruising its way.
4 months will be there.
4 months, yep. So, again, thank you so much for coming and joining us. And everybody, I think you're going to want to be on your computer on the Monday morning after Thanksgiving and tune into the Jet Propulsion Labs feed because you're going to want to see this thing land.
you're shopping.
While you're shopping. You can put the shopping aside for just a few minutes while we do something like land on Mars.
You can follow at NASA JPL and at NASA Insight, and leading up to on Facebook and Instagram, and leading up to the landing, we'll be updating everyone on exactly what time and how the spacecraft's doing, and that's where you'll also see the first pictures of Mars from Insight. Just so exciting.
Wonderful. So when we come back, we're going to take a minute, take a look at Mars, get a nice big full screen view. I hope you'll notice that while it is still wiggling some with the atmosphere, it's actually a little more stable, a little better view now than it was. And in about, looks like about 20 minutes, we will reach the moment of close approach. So when we come back, we'll have a little moment to meet with the cast and writers of The Expanse and hear their view of what things might be like on Mars 200 years into the future. So stay tuned. For those of you who are still up, you stalwart all-nighters, I'm very proud of you. We're wide awake over here. It's a beautiful night. I hope you've had a chance to get outside and look at Mars. And we'll be back with you in just a few minutes.
Exactly. It's all my fault. I'm sorry.
Well, now before this happened, Opportunity was sort of taught a new trick. So let's take a look at that here. We can see in this slide. What are we looking at, and how was this image taken?
So the word selfie did not exist until after Opportunity already went to Mars, so we didn't exactly send a selfie-ready camera to Opportunity. But as we were coming up on Sol 5000, we knew that we wanted to do something special with the rover. You don't exactly hit Sol 5000 more than once, and we wanted to do something special, and so we decided that we were going to do our very first selfie. Now. The camera that we took this with is a microscope, so it's really meant to be close to the ground, a couple millimeters away from the surface, taking high-resolution photos and still black and white. So we really didn't know how it was going to look, but we thought we would try. And so I was the uplink lead on that day, and one of the rover drivers and one of our camera pulls got together, figured out how to do the selfie, and that's what we sent to Mars. And we came into work the next day when the images were coming down, and we couldn't believe it actually worked, and how beautiful it looks, and that you can actually see the rover. And the most interesting thing that we noticed was that there's kind of a necklace almost around her neck there, a little bright strip, and we were wondering what in the world that was. And so we went back to photos of it in the clean room. Turns out that's a strip of Kapton tape that apparently the dust doesn't cling to. She's very dusty otherwise, but she's got her little necklace, so I kind of like that.
That's very nice indeed. Yeah. Now I noticed another picture where she had reached a very steep slope in the valley she's in, and some dust actually was cascading on the solar panels. So is that a way to maybe clean the solar panels, park on a really steep slope? Would that work?
So actually in Perseverance Valley, we actually got some wind cleaning events not too long before the dust storm. Essentially, we were parked up on a little tiny ridge, and it just must have lined up with the wind patterns. And within a few sols, we went from about 50% of our solar panels clean to 90% clean. We had a huge jump in power available, and so that actually helped us prepare to go into this dust storm. Was getting that nice cleaning event a couple weeks beforehand. So that was kind of a fortunate event, and we actually see this continually on Mars. Is every once in a while the winds come and they just blow all the dust right off.
Yeah. So this is really amazing. So Opportunity was sent to Mars at the last close approach. And here we are 15 years later, and we're hoping Opportunity will come back and talk to us again. So amazing mission, certainly groundbreaking, and we learned so much about Mars, and kind of laid the groundwork for the next rover we're going to talk about. Because Mars, of course, has more than just Opportunity on the surface. There's also a rover named Curiosity. So let's talk a little bit about it. Here, bring up this one. So what can you tell me about Curiosity, and what year did we send it, and how is it different than Opportunity?
Curiosity is now 6 years on Mars, and launched in November of 2011 and landed in August of 2012. And it was designed to last about 2 years on the surface of Mars, and now it's been 6, so not quite as old as Opportunity yet, but we're getting there. It's no longer a spring chicken anyway.
Exactly. Now, what was Curiosity's mission?
Curiosity's mission built on all the discoveries from Spirit and Opportunity. As Carrie said, Spirit and Opportunity were really focused around looking for water on the surface of Mars, really finding evidence that water was persistent and flowing on the surface. Curiosity looks for water as well, but also the other elements of habitability. So you can see on this chart, we break down what it takes to support life on Earth. You need liquid water. That's kind of a common denominator for all sorts of life. You need key chemical ingredients, stuff our cells are made out of, the carbon, the nitrogen, the oxygen, the hydrogen, sulfur, all that. And you need sources of energy, whether sunlight or something else that microbes could live off of. So we have this big rover with 10 instruments and 2 laboratories that are built into the rover itself, and a big drill that drills into rocks and gets that precious interior powder of the rocks into these laboratories to do these experiments. And that really is what Curiosity is all about.
Yeah, pretty amazing. The Curiosity, when it landed, it was sent to travel up a mountain called Mount Sharp in the middle of a crater. And that mountain was not the uplift from the formation of the crater, but rather was laid via deposits over time, and then the crater was excavated again via winds, we think. But Curiosity did not head right towards the mountains. It actually kind of drove the wrong way. Why is that when we got there? What inspired us to turn in a different direction and seemingly go the wrong way?
Well, Curiosity's landing system was the most advanced of its time. But even with it, we had to pick an area that was safe over about 12 miles. So we didn't really know where we were going to end up. But we do have these fantastic maps of Gale Crater where we landed from orbit. And once we did know where we actually ended up the day of landing, we found that we were pretty close to what we thought from orbit might be evidence of an ancient lake bed. And what was upstream of that, what really was the evidence, there's a channel that comes down from the northern crater rim. It spreads a fan across the crater floor. We realized that it's only a little bit to the left to go there, even though the rest of the mission was to the right. So we took a pretty momentous decision to not go straight to the mountain, but actually turn left and go see this ancient lake bed. Turned out to be where all the big discoveries of the mission were made in the first year on Mars. So it was a great gamble that we took, and we spent about a year there, in fact. And then we got antsy and decided we really need to head for the mountain.
Turn right and head to the mountain. This slide here you brought to us, you say a river delta. So where did Curiosity actually see this river delta that you were talking about?
It's one of my favorite images from the mission because it just shows so beautifully that we're standing in the middle of what once was an ancient river flowing into the screen here. We're looking sort of downstream, and when this river was carrying sand, it encountered a lake. And we're looking right where the shoreline of this lake was, and these tilted rocks that are in front of us are the sand that dropped out of the water as the water entered into the lake. And as you mentioned, what's not so obvious about this is that there's a mountain sitting where that lake should be. And so the history of Gale Crater that we pieced together is that the crater was once empty, and there was rivers flowing into the crater, and the crater was slowly filling up with muddy water, and the mud settled out, and the sediment just filled the floor of the crater till it got as high as a mountain, and then wind has now carved most of that mud away and leaving a mound in the middle. So it's been a complicated, long history, but one that involves a lot of lakes.
It seems to. Now, what's shocking about that image is how much like Earth that looks like. Now, I know we've corrected the colors on this. If this were on Earth, this is what it would look like. It would be much pinker and redder and dustier looking if we were actually on Mars. But nonetheless, this looks like it could be a shot maybe in Death Valley or out in the Mojave somewhere. We have to remove plants, but still, this is we're seeing a landscape a lot of people are sort of have familiarity with in a way. Is that because so much water was there, do you think?
Yeah, and it's also fundamentally just because Mars and Earth fundamentally are very similar, and that's what's been really striking to me is it's not like an alien world that you've never seen, purple rocks before or something, It's like you're out in the desert. It's like you're in an environment on Earth where it's very dry and arid, like Mars is, and where water and wind are doing most of the geology. And a lot of our geologists on Earth can recognize what they're seeing on Mars because they've seen it when they're out in the Mojave Desert, for example. Yeah.
So now the Murray Buttes on Mars. How did those get formed? And Curiosity visited here, I take it. We have a picture of it.
Yeah, I love this picture too. It's just Bugs Bunny, Roadrunner, landscape here, and you can be in Utah, in this picture. But we're on Mars, and what you're seeing on the floor of this picture is the lake bed rocks. These are the rocks that formed out of mud at the bottom of an ancient lake. After those lakes dried up, sand blew into the crater, and this whole scene that we're looking at was covered by 20, 30, 40 feet of sand that hardened into rock and now has mostly been eroded away, just leaving these little towers of sand overlying the lake bed deposit. So
the towers look like they're very layered. You can see horizontal layers in those. And those must have been laid down over a long time. That's right. That sort of layering we want to go look at on Mount Sharp to learn climate changes on Mars. Mars and those sorts of things. Have we learned anything about that so far?
We have. You know, we now have followed the river through the deltas into the lakes, and once we're at Mount Sharp, we're seeing that now over 1,000 vertical feet of this mountain it consists of little millimeter scale layers of ancient mud. So this mountain built up over eons as lake after lake and mud layer after mud layer piled on top of one another until you now have over 1,000 feet of that. So when we compare that to lakes on Earth, we get an age of at least 10, maybe tens of millions of years when this area was basically covered by lakes.
Okay, so it was a long time that it was covered. This was also a very long time ago. Right. We think this was probably how long ago on Mars?
We know that the crater formed about 3.8 billion years ago, almost 4 billion years ago, and that Mount Sharp had completely formed and been eroded into its present shape by about 3 billion years ago. So everything that we've been studying happened sort of in between those two times, about maybe 3.5 billion years ago.
Okay, so if Mars was habitable, this was quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
And we're really looking for these clues that have been sitting buried for billions of years.
That's right.
And yet we're able to do this.
We are. You know, we can confidently do the geology on rocks that old because the rocks kind of last. What's a lot harder to do is look for the evidence of life. And we don't necessarily look for evidence of life with curiosity, but we do look for things like organic molecules that are part of those raw materials that life needs. And to find those, which we now have in multiple sites, is pretty remarkable when you think that they also have lasted now for 3.5 billion years on the surface.
Right. Now these organic molecules, this is recently there was a claim that Curiosity found some very complicated ones or complex ones that look similar to ones we see in deposits on Earth that come from like oil deposits that have broken down. Does this mean there's oil on Mars where there are, ancient plants and there's this plant matter that was compacted and turned into? Is that the thinking?
I mean, what's fascinating is that is a possibility, but we can't see that. It's not for sure. Yeah, what we do know is that we found little fragments of organic molecules that we think once fit together into these much larger and complex organic molecules, similar to the ones you're describing on Earth, where you have degraded plant matter or dinosaurs or whatever else that gets degraded into this organic goo, and we may be seeing that on Mars, but it's going to take a more sophisticated rover like the 2020 Mars rover to really figure out if it's actually evidence of life or just naturally occurring organic goo. That's another possibility on Mars.
Now, in addition to these organics, Curiosity has seen methane come and go, and it isn't just methane that shows up, it seems to be somewhat seasonal, which is very interesting. Now, where could this methane be coming from?
Well, it's been a long story for us studying it. We first went to Mars with a little detector of methane that was added to Curiosity late in the game because telescopes on Earth found evidence of methane on Mars. So we added this detector, and we were the first mission to land on Mars and measure methane.
Now I should add, methane's an interesting gas because it breaks down. It just doesn't hang around in the atmosphere. If it's put into the atmosphere, it'll react rather quickly and be gone. So the fact we're seeing it means it has to be produced somehow.
That's right. The fact that the telescope saw it from Earth was remarkable because they saw plumes that came and went, and it shouldn't be doing that. Methane gets degraded, as you're saying, so it should just be lasting, hundreds of years and not varying. When we landed, the story only got more complicated because we saw these little burps of methane that lasted just a few weeks and then they would go away. And to be honest, we still haven't explained those. But what we now have seen is that a more constant, not really constant, but a smaller background level of methane is also present when these burps aren't occurring. And that background level varies with a seasonal cycle. And we think that's coming from underground, from natural processes that produce methane in underground, and that the seasons on Mars determine how much it gets in the atmosphere.
Okay. So it just could be something naturally occurring along the lines of volcanism or something like
Yeah,
that.
certain minerals degrade underground and release methane.
So I shouldn't get too excited and think this is bacteria producing methane on Mars.
Well, we're nice skeptical scientists, but again, it really is fascinating that that is a possible explanation.
Yeah, so we'll have to do a little more work. Now, of course, this ties into the recent announcement that Mars has a liquid water lake.
Right.
Now, this isn't on the surface, though.
This lake that was discovered in from a radar instrument on a European spacecraft called Mars Express. They flew a radar across the planet. Those radar signals go deep into Mars, bounce back, and when they encounter something like liquid water, they send a very bright signal back. And they found a patch that's about 12 miles across, but a mile and a half underground.
Oh, so we can't send a rover there, man.
No, but it really is. If this evidence holds up under further scrutiny, it would be the only liquid water that we know of on Mars today.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
It really is. So, what does the future hold? You mentioned another rover, Mars 2020. Are either of you hoping to work on that project, or what can you tell us about it?
My favorite aspect of the 2020 mission so far is the fact they're also going to send a helicopter. And now my background's in meteorology, so the idea of getting to fly something through the atmosphere is pretty exciting.
Now, how would a helicopter on Mars work? Mars's atmosphere is only 1% of Earth's, so a helicopter will really work?
Yeah, so we actually have a vacuum chamber at JPL that we've gotten down to Mars pressure with this helicopter in it and had it fly. So anything's possible if you put enough engineering into it.
That's right. Big blades spinning really fast and a very light helicopter.
Well, that'll be neat once it makes it there. Now, that's more of a testing mission, just to see if this will work and do some exploration with it. The Mars 2020 rover itself, how is that going to get us closer to seeing whether Mars was once alive or maybe has signs of life now?
So what's really been wonderful about NASA's Mars exploration program is one mission builds upon the other. So we went to Mars with orbiters, mapped the whole planet, figured out where to send these landers and rovers, and then we had a rover looking for signs of liquid water, Spirit and Opportunity in the past. We had Curiosity, expanding that for habitability, and then now we're going to actually directly look for signs of life with the 2020 rover in ancient rocks again. So when we think Mars was most likely to have life, it was at 3 to 4 billion years ago. We're going to look for chemical patterns, mineralogical patterns, structures, anything that might be evidence of life actually having taken hold on Mars.
Well, the test is sort of, we know what happened on Earth, and the conditions on Mars seem to have been very similar to what Earth was like when life came about on Earth. So if it happened here, maybe it should have happened on Mars as well. So this is a fascinating thing to test, and it's the closest place we can go to make this test, which is just wonderful.
It is. What I think amazes me about what we've discovered with all these rovers is that, like you're saying, 3 to 4 billion years ago, Mars was even more Earth-like than Earth is today. So that's kind of fascinating to think about.
It's a little crazy. And I just love the fact that we've sent little rolling robots to Mars, and one of them has traveled more than a marathon. Opportunity is now at 28.06, something like that. It's over 28 miles.
Over 40 kilometers.
Over 40 kilometers.
So,
Wow. It's just nuts. And how far has Curiosity gone?
We are now about 20 kilometers.
About 20 kilometers, which is just nuts. I mean, Opportunity is driven further than the distance across Washington, D.C., which is neat. So they can drive that far, and Curiosity's in the bottom of a giant crater on Mars, and within its first year, accomplished its mission. It saw the elements that life needs. We know the energy sources there from the sun, and the signs that water was once present in large quantities. I've often heard that the water was something we could have drank. The pH levels and everything back in the day, we could have got a scoop of it and perhaps just drank it. Then would you trust that? Would you take a drink of Mars water?
Where we first went to that place where we took the left turn, that place was called Yellowknife Bay, and I really think all that is accurate. As we've climbed the mountain, one of the reasons we climbed the mountain, in fact, was to see not just in one place, but layer after layer, how did the climate change, how did the water change. And we've actually seen the water gets saltier, and so it's not going to be as tasty higher up on the mountain.
Exactly. Interesting. Well, thank you both for joining us tonight. It's a beautiful night here in Los Angeles. Beautiful view of Mars. Beautiful warm night here, and the fact we have rovers up there waiting to hear from Opportunity still. So we'll wait for these dust to die down, and Curiosity's just working right through the dust.
That's right.
Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And now.
back, everyone, to beautiful Los Angeles, beautiful Griffith Observatory on a beautiful night. And as you maybe noticed, in fact, Jared, could you pan up the camera a little bit? Let's take a look. Just go straight up. And no, straight up, go straight up. Okay. So we got a beautiful moon there. Go down now. Let's find Mars. Okay, and now launch pause for a second on Mars, and now drop straight down. Literally, we'll get an ugly table, it doesn't matter. There you go. So as you can see, it's really moved. Mars has really moved over the course of the evening because the Earth is turning. So it was low in the sky. It reached its highest point in the sky just about, really, it's already been 50 minutes since the close approach. And so we're going to be here finishing out the evening with a few more guests. And so thank you for all of you who are so hale and hearty to be able to stay up, or maybe you've been partying a little bit, so have another drink. Let's enjoy the rest of our show. We have a few more minutes left.
Have another Mars bar.
Have another Mars bar. That's right, Mars teeny. Is there such a thing?
There ought to be.
There ought to be. We'll have one by one. Anyway, if you think it's late here, imagine that it's 2 hours later in Nashville, Tennessee, where our next guest is coming from live via Skype. So let me introduce him by saying that he will be our guest at All Space Considered this coming Friday. That's just 4 days away. All Space Considered, in case you don't know, is our monthly space and astronomy program at Griffith Observatory, and occasionally we stream that, and we're going to stream Dr. Weintraub's presentation this Friday. So we hope you'll join us and hear more about him. But we thought, we're celebrating Mars, and so we ought to invite my longtime friend David Weintraub, and professor of astronomy at Vanderbilt and author of a new book that, of course, I think it's called What You Need to Know Before You Go is the subtitle. So I'm going to let him tell you all the details. I should have had that book right with me today, but I don't at the moment. So without any further delay, let's go and say good morning, since it's not good evening, to Dr. David Weintraub. Hi, David.
Or good middle of the night.
Thank you for joining us. I really respect how late in the night it is for you to be here. So tell us a little bit about your book.
The main title of the book is Life on Mars, and you got the subtitle right. So Life on Mars, What to Know Before We Go. Much of the book is about the history of what we know about life on Mars, or what we thought we knew about life on Mars. Life on Mars has been discovered many times.
Oh, really?
Really. All of which has been disproven so far. So we've discovered that there's life there, and then those discoveries have been refuted. And we go through this cycle many times. What fascinates me is the question as to whether we have invented the idea about life on Mars because we really want life to exist on Mars, and therefore we're fooling ourselves with much of our discoveries because we want to interpret those discoveries in the best possible light, in which the best possible light means there might be or might have been life on Mars, or whether Mars just never could have had life. And we've just misled ourselves greatly. And since, as your last guest was talking about, discoveries of organic molecules on Mars and methane on Mars, those discoveries could well indicate that life does or did exist on Mars, but also might have absolutely nothing to do with life. And by understanding the history of the science of our search for life on Mars, I think that informs us a lot about what's going on today.
So David, I have to ask, do you want there to be life on Mars?
That's a good way to ask the question. Most people ask me, do you believe there's life on Mars? My answer to that is That question's a terrible question because it doesn't matter what I believe.
And then do they slap you?
But as a scientist, what I believe is irrelevant. It's what I measure. It's what we learn from the measurements. Do I want there to be life on Mars? That's a much better question. So 2 points for you, Lauren. I would love for there to have been life on Mars, or for there to be life on Mars. I think that would be an incredible discovery. It would tell us so much about life in the universe. Because Mars is the closest place in the universe where we might learn about life in the universe beyond the Earth. And if we discovered there is life on Mars, that would tell us life is probably abundant in the universe. Two planets in the same solar system, right next to each other, having similar conditions, with both of them having life, which probably formed independently. That would just be incredible. It's also possible that life on Mars and life on Earth are related. That if life formed on one of the planets, and an impact of an asteroid on one of those objects kicked life to the other planet, and therefore we could be descended from Martians. That would be pretty fascinating to know.
So you're calling me a Martian.
You may well be a Martian. And I might be a Martian as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So earlier today I learned that I had microbes in my body, and now you're telling me I'm a Martian. This is a rough night. I gotta go home and process.
You could be a Martian. I'm going to tell you you are a Martian. You're so cute. Again, what I want is really for us to learn what the answer is.
Yeah.
And I don't have a horse in this race. What I have an interest in is learning what the answer is. And what is incredible is that we actually have the opportunity over the next couple of decades, I think, to learn what that answer is. If we do enough exploration of Mars, we should be able to determine certainly whether life exists on Mars now, and also whether life has existed in the past. Right now, we truly do not know.
Well, we had a lot of visitors on this broadcast tonight from JPL, and early in the evening we spoke with Rich Zurich, who is the chief scientist for the Mars Exploration Program at JPL. And he told us about some of the future missions, and I think we all know about Mars 2020 coming up. But he says we could get a sample return maybe as early as 2026, so that's just not that far away, and that's very exciting, I think.
It is. I wish I'd watched more of the show so I could have this insider information.
Oh, you had to get sleep, you know. Some one of those kinds of excuses, sleep, whatever. So let me ask you this. What do we need to know before we go?
I think what we need to know before we go is the answer to that question. Is there life on Mars? Because if life exists on Mars, I think we have some very, very serious ethical and moral questions to ask ourselves about human exploration of Mars. Putting the physical astronauts on the surface of Mars as opposed to robots. If life exists on Mars, then we should ask ourselves what the risks are for contaminating Mars when we land and try to colonize Mars. Because I think almost certainly life on Mars, if it exists, will have trouble resisting contamination from terrestrial life. And we could wipe out the Martians.
So it would be like discovering the new world where we, just leave diseases to everybody. Yeah.
And
so what's wrong with that? You know, there are people that say, they're microbes, so what?
That's exactly what a lot of people would say. They're just microbes. But these would be microbes that have survived on Mars for billions of years. This is their planet, not our planet. It's an ecosystem that is a completely different biological environment than ours. And the Martians have staked their claim to Mars, even though they haven't built rockets and they haven't tried to explore the Earth, unless War of the Worlds was right. But it's their planet. And yes, many people react and say, well, if it's just microbes, who cares? Microbes are pretty important, and we are inhabited by microbes. Those microbes could in fact inhabit us if we go to Mars and not be very good for us. We could bring the microbes back to Earth despite our best efforts to sterilize anything that comes back. We could contaminate life on Earth. I think the unintended consequences of putting terrestrial life in a Martian environment where Mars life already exists are pretty serious. And we should understand what those are. And we should decide as a global community whether the possibility of wiping out Martian life, which we could well do, is something we can live with. Is it our manifest destiny to colonize Mars, whether there are Martians there or not? Because if we do, we could destroy the life on that planet.
This is a fascinating subject, and I must tell you how much I look forward to talking to you at length on Friday. This is just a teaser, a short version. I am, it's a very sobering topic that you brought up, and one that I think is absolutely important to consider. I mean, naturally we see. Well, first of all, there isn't a global we. We are a planet made of many different entities, different nations, different corporations. I'm sure this is probably given quite a lot of thought to this. And so that begs the question, which I am not asking you to answer now because I'm going to ask you to answer it on Friday. But that, what can we or should we be doing now in light of this concern and these ideas? I know you probably want to answer, but I'm quite serious when I would say I would really like to hear, I know there are people watching now, and we will post his, just like this will be posted. If you can't tune in on Friday evening, we'll post David's presentation on YouTube and on live stream afterwards, so you can see it for the interest of times, and also just so we can dive a little deeper into it. I'm going to let you and let our audience and anyone who may come to All Space Considered on Friday and tune in then give some thought to that, because that would be a discussion I think we're all going to want to have that evening. What do we do? It's one thing to think it, and then, but how do we act as a planet? If only do you watch The Expanse?
I watch The Expanse.
If we only had Ansarala, she's the UN sort of the head of Earth, and she could speak for us as a global planet. So we're going to have to get her back to tell us what to do about how we can get a global answer. Anyway, before you sign off, are there other aspects of the book that you'll be talking about on Friday that we're going to want to hear about?
I will spend a bit of time talking about the history of what we learned incorrectly about life on Mars, because I think that informs us a lot about how we do our science. I'll spend some time talking about the history of the methane observations. I don't know how much was covered of that by earlier speakers tonight, but the methane observations we've made of Mars today are influenced and understood in the context of 50 years of methane observations. Some of which may be right, some of which may be wrong, and I think that's very important to know about in order to understand what's happening on Mars today, because I think those methane observations are incredibly important for understanding Mars. Incredibly important. The other thing I'd like to talk a little bit about, but my lips will be sealed about it tonight because we can wait till Friday, is what we know about Europa and Enceladus, the moon of Jupiter and the moon of Saturn, in the context of this same conversation we're having about the possibility of life on Mars.
That's very, very exciting.
Extremely exciting. The methane results themselves, I'm very much looking forward to hear what you have to say about that, because I've heard a lot about it. So any insight you have as to whether these are believable or not, and what it really means, I greatly look forward to that on Friday.
I would love to spend some time talking about that.
So we're just being terrible for all those people staying up late say, well, we'll tell you on Friday. But truly, he's going to get on a plane and fly all this way, so we have to make it worth his while to come out. We'll also have copies of his book, and he'll be doing a book signing, so we really look forward to that. And it will be so lovely to see you again. I'll just have to say that David and I went to college together. We were undergrads together. Sat through many a class with Richard Larson and Beatrice Tinsley and other.
I should have gotten through them without you, Laura.
I know. I thank you for that. And I was saying to him, I'm going to have to ask you about the virial theorem when you get here.
I've forgotten an awful lot of stuff.
So David, so lovely to see you. I mean, I haven't seen you in so long, I can't remember. So it'll be wonderful to see you on Friday, real time, in person, and to give some really serious consideration to this very thoughtful topic. And thank you so much for staying up so late to talk about it, and for bringing it to all of our attention, because it's really an important thing to think about. So thank you so much. I can't wait to see you Friday. And tune in again on Friday to All Space Considered, 7:30. I guess it's not, people do advertising. It's true to do a teaser. It's not too evil of me, right?
I think at this time in the morning we're allowed.
Okay.
It's your program. You get to do what you want.
What can I say? So, okay, well, thank you, David, again for coming and for coming in live via Skype, and we'll see you Friday. And viewers, stay tuned. We have one final guest. It's going to take us to the 2 o'clock hour. We're going to be looking at pictures that were taken tonight with the telescopes here by our astronomical observer and our telescope demonstrator, who is an image does astrophotography, absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. So we actually have pictures of Mars that he took with infrared filters, did some processing on them tonight here while we were doing this, and he's going to come and join us in just a few minutes. So stay tuned. We'll look at some of the best images from the night. I just heard the thumb drive drop on us. We'll see.
We'll see what those images are doing.
Yeah, we'll see what those images look like now. So if you guys want to go back to Mars and to the music, and we'll set up for our next guest. welcome back, everyone, to our last intrepid guests of the evening. It's been a long, beautiful night of looking at Mars. So you can see Mars there as seen from our historic Zeiss Telescope Dome at Griffith Observatory, down in the right-hand corner. And you can sort of see as it's getting a little bit lower in the sky, you'll see all that atmospheric wiggling going on. I'm joined now, as I say, our last guest for this evening are Tony Cook, who's from All Space Considered and is our astronomical observer, and Blake Estes, who is a telescope demonstrator here at Griffith Observatory and also an avid astrophotographer. So Tony, who runs the, and I guess this is a good time to say, the Griffith Sky Report Twitter feed. I do the All Space Considered Twitter feed, so join us both on Twitter. Often posts pictures from Blake because Blake's pictures are just so lovely. So we wanted to show you a couple pictures that he took tonight, and then a couple pictures he took at Mount Wilson just how many days ago?
Let's see, it was a week before last.
A week before last. So let's go first to your picture, the infrared picture you took of Mars tonight. So Blake, tell us all about that. Let's remove the picture-in-picture so we don't have competing Marses. That's the plural of Mars. Marsies. Marsi. Mises. Okay, wait, it's late. We gotta get back on point here. So here is Mars as seen in the infrared. Tell us all about this image.
Absolutely. So, as many of you know, there is unfortunately, a global dust storm occurring on Mars right now that has obscured most of the surface. There are a few holes that have opened up and allowed us to see some of the albedo features, those darker areas on there. But in the infrared, as you go further into infrared, this particular image was taken at around 742 nanometers. You can actually start to peer through the dust quite a bit. And so this is the Tharsis region, and if we look very carefully down.
Hey, you're watching NASA TV on the air and online every day on this planet and beyond.